Today, we are jumping right into the absolute hurricane that was the 2025 New York City mayoral race.
Um, yeah, hurricane is the right word.
I mean, this campaign had everything. Unprecedented legal drama, ideological warfare, and just astonishing political comebacks and collapses.
Right.
We've pulled together a whole stack of sources covering everything from federal indictments all the way to the final, really shocking demographic data.
And our mission today really is to get past the headlines. We need to look at the chaotic exit of the incumbent, Eric Adams, and then dissect how a democratic socialist platform managed to pull off a primary upset.
And then there's the general election itself, this
Yeah.
just bizarre mix of opponents.
Exactly. And finally, what the numbers tell us, because they reveal this profound generational and demographic mandate that, nobody really saw coming.
The history books are already being written on this. On November 4th, 2025, Zohran Mamdani, running on the Democratic and Working Families ticket, he wins. He defeats both Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa.
And it is a monumental moment for the city. Mamdani is set to be the first Muslim mayor, the first South Asian mayor, and get this, the youngest mayor of New York City since 1892.
Wow.
But what really sets the stage for all this is the turnout. I mean, over 2 million people voted. That's the highest number since 1969.
And that was mostly young people, right?
It was almost entirely driven by a massive, and I mean massive, young voter registration drive.
That level of turnout just tells you how much energy was swirling around the city. Okay, so let's start at the beginning of the chaos. The incumbent, Eric Adams. The sources all show his second-term hopes were, well, they were dead in the water long before the election even got going.
Oh, absolutely. By September 2024, the ground had just completely shifted from under him. You have Adams, a sitting mayor, indicted on federal charges: bribery, fraud, illegal foreign campaign donations.
I mean, his approval rating in October 2024 was, what, 26%?
A mere 26%. He was the first sitting mayor in the city's history to face criminal charges while he was still in office. It was unheard of.
But then the legal drama takes this really weird turn, a turn that goes all the way to Washington, D.C.
It does. In early 2025, the Department of Justice, which you have to remember, is now operating under the second Trump administration. They make this extraordinary decision. They drop all the charges.
It's like that.
Dismissed with prejudice in April 2025. The whole case just vanished.
The optics of that must have been terrible.
Politically charged is an understatement. Adams maintained his innocence, of course, but for the DOJ under a Republican president to suddenly drop the case, well, it led to a lot of speculation. We'll get to that later.
But the damage was already done for him.
Way too severe. Even with the legal cloud gone, he tried to run as an independent, but he pulled out in late September. His name was still on the ballot, technically, but his campaign was over.
And that created the vacuum that led to the June 24th Democratic primary. This was the real flashpoint, and it used ranked choice voting.
Yes, RCV. And the story going in was all about Andrew Cuomo, trying to make this big political comeback after he resigned in 2021 over the sexual harassment scandal. Everyone thought he was the favorite.
He was the front runner.
He was, but this is where you really have to understand how ranked choice voting works. Mamdani was able to use the system perfectly. He wasn't just running against Cuomo. He was also up against other progressives like Brad Lander, the city comptroller.
So the first round of votes, Cuomo was ahead.
He was leading, yeah. But Mamdani had a really strong base of first-choice votes from the progressive wing of the party.
So when the other candidates were eliminated, their voters' second and third choices got redistributed. So where did those votes go?
They went overwhelmingly to Mamdani. The people who voted for Lander and the other progressives, they saw Cuomo, with all his baggage and his centrist politics, as just an unacceptable option. So RCV allowed this anti-Cuomo coalition to build.
And that was enough.
It was more than enough. In the final round, Mamdani beats Cuomo with 56% of the vote. It was, and everyone called it this, a major ideological upset.
So that primary result just cemented it. This election wasn't going to be about small policy changes. It was going to be a sharp ideological fight, and it was all centered on Mamdani's democratic socialist platform.
Precisely. Mamdani's message was laser-focused on the affordability crisis. And this wasn't subtle stuff. This was radical policy for a city like New York.
He proposed a flat 2% tax on anyone earning over $1 million.
Yep. And an immediate rent freeze on all rent-stabilized apartments. Plus, just this huge investment in new public housing.
And our sources show that this caused some real nervousness, especially the wealth tax and the rent freeze proposals. Wall Street and the luxury real estate market were definitely paying attention.
And that fear is exactly what Cuomo tried to use in the general election. After he lost the primary, he refused to quit. He started his own party, the Fight and Deliver Party, just to stay on the ballot.
His platform was basically the anti-Mamdani platform.
Totally. It was broadly centrist, hyper-focused on crime, on combating anti-Semitism. He was trying to appeal to moderate Democrats, to Republicans, to the city's old power structure.
And that's when you start to see these strange alliances form. Cuomo started looking for big endorsements, and he got them. Most notably from Donald Trump and Elon Musk right before the election.
Which is just fascinating because at the same time, you have this fragmentation of the conservative vote.
Yeah.
While Cuomo is trying to be the centrist alternative, you still have the actual Republican candidate, Curtis Sliwa, firmly in the race.
And Sliwa is just running on his own protect animals line, tough on crime, you know the brand.
Exactly.
So you had all this pressure for everyone to just rally around Cuomo to stop Mamdani. Another independent, Jim Walden, he dropped out in September and basically begged everyone else to do the same to stop splitting the vote. So why didn't that unified anti-socialist front ever happen?
Well, a few reasons, but a huge part of it was Sliwa. He just refused to budge. His voters were loyal to him, not to some generic anti-Mamdani movement. They probably wouldn't have gone to Cuomo anyway, given his history.
They saw him as an opportunist.
Right. But Sliwa made sure there was no chance of consolidation with that unforgettable quote. He said he would rather be executed and impaled on a stake than drop out to help Andrew Cuomo.
That's a quote that will live on. It just made it crystal clear that the anti-Mamdani vote was going to be completely fractured.
So while you have this ideological battle raging, the general election campaign itself just gets messy. It devolved into all this personal controversy and political maneuvering.
And the most explosive part of that was the rumored backroom deal, the one involving former Mayor Adams, former President Trump, and Andrew Cuomo.
Right. So Adams drops out in late September, and it comes right after these reports that he'd met with Trump's advisors about a potential job in the administration, like an ambassadorship.
And the trade-off was he drops out to help Cuomo beat Mamdani.
That was the allegation. And Trump himself added fuel to it. He had supported Adams earlier, and he even said that he'd, quote, helped him out a little bit with that whole dropped corruption case.
Which Mamdani seized on immediately.
Of course. He framed the whole thing as this desperate attempt to rig the election, a betrayal of Democratic voters.
But beyond the big politics, the attacks on Mamdani got intensely personal. There's a big controversy over his college application from 2009.
Yeah, this was something else. Mamdani's background is Indian-Ugandan, so on his application, he checked both Asian and Black or African-American to represent that. His opponents jumped on it, tried to paint it as some kind of fraud.
It felt like an attempt to just delegitimize him, his identity.
It was, but Cuomo's most specific attack, the one he really hammered, was on housing, the very core of Mamdani's campaign. Cuomo falsely claimed that Mamdani lived in a rent-controlled apartment.
And in New York City, that's a sharp knife to twist.
It is. He was trying to argue that Mamdani was secretly benefiting from this exclusive housing status while, single mothers were in shelters.
But it wasn't true.
No. Mamdani had to quickly clarify it was rent-stabilized, not rent-controlled, and said he planned to move out eventually. But the attack was calculated. It was designed to paint the affordability champion as a hypocrite.
And then, on a kind of surreal note, even the New York Knicks got involved.
Yeah, they sent him a cease and desist letter because a logo in one of his campaign ads apparently looked a little too much like theirs.
But moving to the more serious attacks, Cuomo repeatedly accused Mamdani of being homophobic.
This all stemmed from Mamdani's dual citizenship with Uganda, a country with some truly hostile anti-LGBT laws. And the issue blew up after a photo surfaced of Mamdani with a Ugandan official who had pushed for that legislation.
And Mamdani apologized for the photo.
He did. He said he wouldn't have taken it if he'd known the official's record. But he didn't just let the accusation sit there, he fired back.
Right, he brought up Cuomo's own family history.
That's right. He pointed to the irony of the attack, criticizing Cuomo for his father, Mario Cuomo's campaign back in 1977. They distributed homophobic flyers against Ed Koch, who was a closeted gay man at the time. It just highlighted that, things were complicated on both sides.
The temperature of the campaign it hit a boiling point after the primary. The language shifted from politics to just open xenophobia.
The backlash against Mamdani was immense, and it was characterized by this wave of Islamophobic attacks, constant references to 9/11, terrorism tropes, and it came from all over, especially national Republican figures who decided to jump into a city race.
We saw Representative Nancy Mace tweeting "Never forget" in connection with him. Marjorie Taylor Greene posted that image of the Statue of Liberty in a burqa. But it wasn't just the far right, which is what's so disturbing.
No, it wasn't. The actress Deborah Messing, who's a pretty high-profile Democrat, she claimed that Mamdani celebrates 9/11.
And then there was the radio interview with Cuomo.
That might have been the lowest point. The host suggested Mamdani would be cheering if another 9/11 happened, and Cuomo, he just laughed. Mamdani condemned it, called it disgusting, which it was.
Even Senator Kirsten Gillibrand had to walk back comments.
She did. She had to publicly apologize after she falsely claimed Mamdani supported violence against Jewish people based on the idea of global jihad. It was just this constant barrage.
And it got so bad that even the constant mispronunciation of his name became a political issue.
That's a really important point because Mamdani specifically called out Cuomo, Sliwa, Trump, and Musk for what he said was intentional misspelling and mispronunciation. He saw it as a form of othering, a subtle way to constantly paint him as foreign, as not one of us, to undermine his legitimacy.
So after all of that, the federal chaos, the ideological fights, the bitter personal attacks, what did the final map actually tell us?
Well, in the general election, which used the standard first-past-the-post system, Mamdani won with 50.39% of the vote, and he crossed the 1 million vote mark. No candidate had done that since 1969.
It's a clear mandate.
It is, but it also paints a picture of a city that's deeply divided by age, by ideology, by borough. Mamdani won 4 of the 5 boroughs. Brooklyn was his best result at almost 57%, then Queens, Manhattan, and the Bronx. Cuomo only managed to win Staten Island.
And even that Staten Island result is pretty historic in its own way, right?
It is, because while Cuomo won it, it was the first time a Republican did not win Staten Island since 1985. It just shows you how fractured that conservative, anti-Mamdani vote really was. It couldn't even coalesce around one candidate in its strongest borough.
But the real aha moment for anyone trying to understand this, it's in the demographics. The generational divide is just stunning.
Absolutely. This is where you see the mandate. The youth vote was decisive. Mamdani won an unbelievable 78% of voters aged 18 to 29.
78%.
And he got 66% of the 30 to 44 bracket. On the flip side, Cuomo's base was older voters. He won 56% of those 65 and up. That data tells the whole story. Young people handed Mamdani this election because he was talking about freezing rent and taxing wealth, things that directly address the cost of living crisis that affects them the most.
And his coalition was strong across racial lines, too.
He won a majority of black residents, 61%, and Hispanic residents, 57%. But there was another critical split, and that was among Jewish voters. They preferred Cuomo by almost 2-1.
63% for Cuomo.
And just 33% for Mamdani. And in precincts with large Orthodox Jewish populations, Cuomo won almost 80%. That shows a major split within a traditionally Democratic voting bloc.
But the signal for the future seems pretty undeniable. Mamdani won 66% of all first-time voters.
The closing scenes of the whole thing really give you insight into the animosity that now defines New York politics. Cuomo conceded, but it was a very defiant non-concession.
He refused to even call Mamdani to congratulate him.
Refused. But he did make a point of boasting that his vote total as an independent was higher than his father's was back in 1977.
And Sliwa, of course, was much more direct. He basically warned the new mayor, if you try to implement socialism, we are mobilizing.
Mamdani's victory speech was just as intense. He opened with a quote from the socialist Eugene V. Debs and made it clear he wasn't moving to the center. He said he was young, Muslim, a democratic socialist, and refused to apologize for any of it. And then he said of Cuomo, "Let tonight be the final time I utter his name."
And the reaction from the outside was instant and just as polarized.
Completely. Internationally, you had London's mayor, Sadiq Khan, saying hope won, but then major Jewish organizations like the AJC and the ADL put out a joint statement that same night, vowing to hold Mamdani accountable, saying his core beliefs were fundamentally at odds with our community's deepest convictions.
And what about the business community, the economic reaction?
The jitters were real. Jamie Dimon at JPMorgan Chase was pragmatic, said he'd work with Mamdani, but you had governors from states like Florida and Tennessee openly trying to capitalize on the result. They were basically advertising for New York businesses to relocate, especially in finance and real estate.
So Mamdani clearly believes he has a mandate. He said the electorate gave him the right to implement his agenda, including taxing the rich. He's framing this as a total rejection of the old way of doing politics.
He is. And so the challenge now for anyone watching is to figure out what this means. Was this just a unique, isolated thing, a reaction to New York's specific scandal-plagued environment? Or is this a real, enduring ideological shift in the Democratic Party that we should expect to see happening in other big cities across the country?